So you've opened up your project after adding CreoTerra to it, and now you may be asking yourself, well, how do I actually use this stuff, It's not much in the description telling you what to do, so let me quickly walk you through the basics and the not so basics. Alright, so if you open up your project, you should be seeing something that at least slightly resembles this. Obviously you're gonna have all your stuff in there, like all your folders, all your assets, the level, and whatnot. So you're gonna have your CreoTerra folder in the content. You're just gonna click on it, obviously, and open the example level. That's where you're gonna find a bunch of assets. Ignore them. Just click on this L_content examples, like that, and this little examples map should load. Alright, now there are a few things to consider doing before you use this asset, which is actually all listed here in this front panel, or whatever you call it. So just make sure to enable support UV from hit results in your project settings, and while you're, if you plan to paint on your planets, you should also set your game mode override in the world settings to the paint GM. Alright, so let me quickly show you how you can do this if you don't quite understand what I'm talking about. So if you don't have your world settings here in this details panel, you just go to window here, and you should find the world settings in the middle of this drop down menu. So you're gonna open this is gonna pop up in this side panel. I've got it set up so the layout is like Unreal Engine 4. So you just open your world settings, and right at the top you should see a game mode override, and by default you're gonna have your own game mode or none. And while you are painting your planets, just choose this BP_paint GM so you can actually interact with your planets while painting. Obviously you shouldn't forget the support UV from hit results, so just open your project settings. So just open your project settings in this edit tab, project settings, and you're gonna want to search support UV. Yeah, that's right. And then there's gonna be this one single option that shows up, which says support UV from hit results, and you just take it, and you're gonna be asked to restart the editor. So you just normally restart it. Click on this button that shows up here. I think I can even show you. See this pop-up here? Just click on restart now, and save selected if you haven't already. Alright, after you restarted, just close out of these project settings, go back to the example level map, and everything should work as intended. Alright, so I'm going to walk you through this basic, sort of user's manual, I guess, on actually how to use the asset. So first of all, there are three kinds of, three main types of assets. The probably most important one is BP_planet, which is your actual planet. You can tweak your settings in this blueprint, and this is, the actual planets that are drawn here are of the class BP_planet. And then you have your terrain painter, which is the blueprint that's responsible for all the painting functionality that this product offers you. And then you have your BP_texture baker, which as the name implies, you can use to bake your textures. Always make sure, if you want to bake your textures, that you apply it to your planet, otherwise it won't work. It will work, but the results are going to look a bit funny, so just make sure to assign it. Let's start with the BP planet. So, as I just said, the BP planet is your actual planet. You can directly tweak the settings from the details panel of the blueprint. In order to find your BP_planet, you just go into the CreoTerra folder, and basically in the terrain folder, and then in the blueprints folder you are finally gonna find these 3 main blueprints. And let me first of all drag out a new planet. So just drag and drop into your scene. Gonna see the inside of it. And right now you may notice that the lighting is not matching with all the other planets because the light source is not set yet. And so in order to set it, you just go into the details panel of your planet blueprint, and then you navigate to the light section here. And yeah, if you have placed a new planet, you're gonna see that it's none currently. But if you actually select your light source with this eyedropper tool, you should see the lighting update immediately. So right now, lighting just updated to actually match the position of this light source relatively to the planet, and you can actually see the sunsets now. I mean, proper sunsets. Yeah. Much more importantly, you have lots of settings like the atmosphere and the planet surface, the clouds, and even the default settings here, where you can define things like the planet scale, which is at 8 right now, well, by default. If you want to scale it up, you're free to do it. And all the assigned materials are going to reflect the changes seamlessly. Alright, but let's set this back to 8 for now. And there's this refresh button I added, just in case something shouldn't update. You just go to this refresh button and you just click on it to sort of refresh the blueprint. Shouldn't have to use this tick box too often, because usually it immediately changes the blueprint accordingly to your changes. So that's that. You can also decide whether the planet is paintable, which will ultimately let the planet painter actually interact with the terrain of the planet, but we'll get to that later. But I just recommend to leave it on, just as a rule of thumb. Then we have the rotation angle, and I have made it so that it rotates around the local z-axis of the planet, which means that right now it's gonna rotate around this straight up vector. Let me show you. So right now it's rotating perfectly around this blue arrow here. If you want to change the axis, you can just change the local orientation of the planet. So if I rotate it like this, right, so now the local z-axis of the planet is going to be rotated about 45 degrees. And if you try to rotate the planet now, it should rotate around this blue arrow here. So let me try that again, and as you can see, now it's rotating around this new z-axis that we've set, and now you can actually see the polar caps. So next up we have the random generation options, but they are described in this section of the examples map, so it should be pretty straightforward. You just set a seed, and obviously before that you have to enable generate random planet. Then you can actually see your planet update, and then you can actually change the seed to any integer value. I can change this to 1, to 2, 3, 4, and this should give you pretty varied results if you're not into like fine-tuning any of the details of the planet. So if you just need some quick decoration or whatever, this is the perfect option pretty much. Alright, so let me set this back to 0 and disable generate random planet, and as you can see, the planet stays the same as it was generated before by this random generation function. And this can be useful if you don't want to accidentally, like, I don't know, change the seed to 113 maybe and have your planet update and not remember the initial seed that you've set. So if you disable generate random planet, yeah, it will ultimately stay at the seed that you've set before disabling this option. So if I enable it again, you should see it update to the current seed. And now if I disable generate random planet and change the seed again, it's not gonna reflect these changes because I've disabled the option. Alright, so let's move on to clouds. First of all, we can control the cloud altitude. And just so it's better visible, I'm gonna reset this planet to its default version. Alright, so first thing you can control is the cloud altitude. Right now you can see that it's, well, the altitude of the clouds, it's pretty much sort of matching the Earth clouds. Well, as closely as I could replicate that. If you want to change the altitude, however, relative to the planet size, well, you just set a value other than 1 in this cloud altitude parameter. So if you want them to be higher, you can set it to something like, I don't know, 0.05. You can see they're pretty high up now. And you're also going to see that their shadows have actually shifted to correctly project, well, the shadow of the clouds onto the planet's surface. You can see that in action if you just change the parameter. So now you can see how the shadows are sort of changing based on the height of the clouds. Alright, the next parameter in the cloud section is the material quality, which is present in every section that has anything to do with materials. So I don't know, like things like clouds, the planet's surface, as well as the atmosphere, all have 4 material qualities available. First one being ultra, and then going down to high, medium, and all the way down to low. So one thing you should remember before changing the quality is that it actually usually will change the look of the material more or less radically depending on the quality you choose. So always make sure to choose the quality of your material before actually editing your terrain and fine-tuning it. So it's not gonna be changed by the material quality and you have to do the tweaking all over again. Right, so I'm gonna just show you how the different qualities look for the clouds as an example. Right, I'm gonna fly up close. I'm gonna fly close to the planet. Alright, and now if you change the cloud quality from ultra to high, you're gonna see it changed a bit. Didn't change much. I mean, you can see some difference, but I think in the case of clouds, this won't affect your clouds greatly. Right, if we go down all the way to medium, it's gonna change even more. Now you can see that it differs a lot from the ultra quality because I'm removing any costly calculations like the actual different projection techniques and going with a much cheaper solution. So that's part of the reason it looks so different now. But as you can see, you still have the shadows, and if you now go down to low, the shadows should disappear. Obviously you can also change the actual texture scale of the cloud texture. Right now it's at 500, I can change that. But I don't recommend you to change this value too radically because it will actually, if you scale them up too high, it's going to show some repetition because obviously it's a tile texture. And not to scale them down too low because otherwise it may lose significant amounts of detail. Alright, I'm gonna set this back to ultra. Obviously you can change the color of the clouds here. Set them to anything you like. And in a separate section, the dusk dawn section, you can actually change the color of the clouds at the dawn area, dusk or dawn area specifically. Right now it's set to an orangish type of like earth-like sunset color. Again, you can change that to anything you want. Like if you want more like alien style planet, you're gonna probably go for something like, I don't know, green. It's all up to you. If you go into the atmosphere section, you're gonna see that again. Obviously we have these 4 parameters. I'm not gonna show every single one for every single section because that's gonna like extend this video into infinity, so let me just stick to the basics pretty much. So there are 2 different ways I've set the atmosphere up to be calculated. First one is sphere normal, which I'm gonna say right away fits best for atmospheres that are very thin and barely visible. In these cases it pretty much works best. However, if you change your atmosphere scale, which you can find in general settings, if you change the atmosphere height. Now first of all, you may be wondering, why is it so blown out now? Why is it so bright? Like, did I break anything or something like that? And no, you didn't. I've just set this parameter up in a way that gives the most control over how strong the atmosphere fade is. So you can change the fall off here. And let's set this to a higher value as well. Now you can see that you have a thicker atmosphere, but also if you look at the transition between day and night, you're gonna see that the transition actually moves depending on where you are viewing the planet from. And so if you have a thicker atmosphere, it is recommended to use not the sphere normal but the planet shadow instead, which is actually going to pretty much accurately calculate a shadow for this planet. And so that way you're not going to get changing brightness depending on your view. And you can actually see how this shadow sort of extends into the distance opposite from the sun. Okay, and in the atmosphere sections, just like in the cloud section, you can change the color, the primary color of the atmosphere, and additionally the dusk or dawn color. So I may also mention before I forget that the settings for the color of the atmosphere and the color of the clouds are separate. So you can have, let's say, a green fade off in the atmosphere, and over at the clouds you let's make it more contrasty. Over at the clouds you could have a more I don't know, like a violet color sort of theme going on. So it's really entirely up to you how you tweak the individual components, and I just wanted to leave this extra control in for it to be tweakable. Right, let's set them back. And now continuing with the actual planet surface shader, which is probably the one that has the most different parameters. As you can see, this planet surface section is divided into 8 subsections, mainly covering different climate zones and actually making them fine-tunable, I guess. So in the continent section you can pretty straightforward just invert them. So now you have land where there used to be water, or water where there used to be land, which can be pretty useful in some cases. And if you were to change the noise offset, this is probably like the seed of the continent generation, which means that if you change this value, you should see the continents sort of shift and give you lots of different varied results. And if you change the continent scale, which is also pretty self-explanatory, you just changing how big the continents are. You can make them really small if you wanted to. So right now you have something that's close to islands. So let me set this back. And you also have a bunch of different settings inside the continent step, like continent warping, which uses another noise to warp the continent noise, or texture-based detail, which gives detail to, most importantly, the coastlines using the texture that it's using. So you can see that it sort of lines up with the mountains here. So if I increase this, you should see more of the texture being subtracted away from the actual continents. And you can also sort of control the amount of detail and the amount of water you have on your planet that way. But there are a bunch of more different ways to do that. Alright, let's skip this terrain section for now, because most of the parameters are pretty self-explanatory, and if not, you can just play around with them, see what you can come up with. So I'm gonna skip terrain for now and jump right ahead to ocean, which also has some parameters exposed to you, like the ocean level. Pretty much adjusts the amount of ocean there is on a planet based on the height of the continents. And if you look at the clouds, when I change the ocean, you can see that they are actually getting less opaque the more land there is around them. And also you can change the ocean depth, which is most relevant for the bathymetry settings, which you can find below. So if you change the ocean depth, you're gonna see the shallow color now fading into a more like dark blue color, and you can actually change these colors here. So if you want to change the way things look at the coastlines, you can click on this shallow ocean tint and change it to your heart's content. And this is gonna update all of the oceans, the bodies of water and the rivers, anything that contains water. And of course you can also change the actual deep water color. You can make it brighter if you want, make it darker, make it completely black, all up to you. Now there is a separate parameter for bathymetry visibility, which just smoothly changes between completely visible and not visible at all. So if you have this set to 1, you can see all of the bathymetry, and if you slowly start to change it, you should see it fade away. This is just in order to give you some more fine control. And then you have the bathymetry texture detail, which is just how much of the ground texture is used to sort of add little details to these underwater formations, I guess. So the smaller number you set it to, the less detail there's gonna be, and the greater the number is, the more you should see get subtracted away from these coastlines. Okay, so I'm going to again skip a few of them for now, and let's focus on a desert real quick. So the first and most straightforward option is to just disable the desert, which does as it says. And like in every terrain parameter, or pretty much in any parameter, you can also change the colors of the desert. So you can have some, I don't know, I'm exaggerating this, but you can have some blue patches and some yellow ones, because why not? And likewise, you can also change the color of the grasslands, which is probably the most pronounced biome of the planet usually. So you can change the color here, and again it's going to change certain patches of the landscape, so you always have control over the amount of texture variation your terrain has. And now let's jump to the interesting part, the cities. The cities, you can see them even during daytime if you zoom in closely on a planet. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm able to do this right now, but if you set this value to something really high, like, I don't know, 10,000, cities should be much more apparent now. And by the way, don't be confused by this sort of flickering I have when I move into close to the planet. I've just set the atmosphere scale probably way higher than I should have for this sort of effect that I have right now, so I can set it to something much lower and the effect will go away, but right now I'm showcasing the different features. It's not really necessary. So if you look at the unlit side of the planet, you should see some city lights pop up, mostly next to coastlines or rivers, but also sometimes in the middle of the continents. Not as often though. And right now this is way too overblown because I've set the value too high. I'm gonna return to the default. Now the effect is much more subtle, much nicer looking. And you can actually see that these cities are pretty detailed as well. And of course, as it is the case with all of the parameters, you can change the color of the lights. You can set this to something like purple, for example, and they change accordingly. Now you may be confused with this city tint parameter. This is actually for the tint of the cities at daytime, so when they are not lighting up. And like I said, right now I'm having difficulties trying to show them. Probably I'm gonna set the value to a higher one again. Alright, and let me find some city. Alright, there we have some. I'm gonna zoom in a bit. So these little grayish grains that you see on this peninsula are the actual cities. Right now they're way too opaque because of, again, exaggerated value. But now if I change the city tint, you can actually see the actual cities change their color. Not the light color, but the actual tint of them. So like, if you were to imagine it as an actual city, you could say that it's the average color of the buildings inside these cities. Yeah, that's pretty much the most important parameters you have in the BP Planet actor. Alright, so let's say you want to paint the actual terrain on the planet. For that, you need to assign this little blueprint actor to your desired planet. And it's also worth mentioning that you shouldn't have more than one of these planet painter blueprints in your level, so the system doesn't get confused and always knows what planet you actually want to paint on. And right now in this level you already have the planet painter blueprint as well as the texture baker. So you just click on it, go into its details panel, click on this eyedropper and select your planet. If you additionally want to bake your planet textures, you should also assign your planet as the target planet of the texture baker actor, which is this one. Well, it doesn't really have a visual indication, it's just this icon. Yeah, and now if you have set up your game mode like was shown before, you should be able to now paint on your planet. So if you start to play in editor mode, you should see your planet in the center of the screen, and first of all you can change your resolution you want to paint with. It's not the actual resolution of your maps you're going to be exporting, but it's just your resolution you use for the painting. So let's set this to something like 4K. And you're going to see that the shading is going to disappear. You can actually re-enable it by hitting U. It's pretty much just checking and unchecking this unlit mode checkbox. You can also do it with your mouse if you want to. Alright, and if you want to paint, you just click on the part of the planet you want to paint on. So let's say we want to paint some sort of long island in this ocean part. You just click and drag, and you're gonna see some landmass appear. Let's connect this, and if you want less detail on your coasts, you can just decrease the warping amount and maybe also the detail amount. Now your coasts are gonna be much smoother. You can also change your brush size. So if you want to paint more detail, you can use a smaller one. Obviously that's going to require more resolution if you want to paint like really small details. So you can, I don't know, fill this little lake here. Let's set this to a larger scale like this. And that's pretty much how it works. Right now you cannot actually paint water on the parts you've painted land on before, so you have different modes in here where you can choose between painting land, ocean, and height. And if you want to paint water, you can paint it on the parts you previously added land to before. So always keep that in mind, that you can just add water to the parts that are actually originally land. So let's choose this continent here and add some sort of maybe small lake. Yeah, something like this. You can also change this intensity here to a smaller value. And as you can see, the color of this brush is indicating how intense it is. So the greener it is, the less intense, and the more sort of violet it is, it's more intense. So let me set this something like this and paint on the terrain. You should see that the changes on your terrain should be much smoother now. If you want to make them even more smooth, you can disable warping, disable detail, and make the brush way less intense. That way you have perfect smooth brush strokes. So that's how that looks. Let's add some detail, just so there's something, at least something to look at. Okay, that was a bit too much. And you can just freely paint on your planet whatever you want. Obviously, if you don't want any land on a planet at all when you're painting, you can just hit escape and change the water level on your planet, which is on the planet's surface, material parameters, and ocean. Now you can change this to 1, so it's all water now. And if you paint on the planet now, you can entirely control where land is going to appear. And if you want to clear all your changes from the render target, you just hit clear render target, and there's gonna be this pop-up asking you whether you actually want to do it, and you just say yes. Right, so let's paint some continent, I don't know, something like this. Right, that's the smoothest continent in this entire world. And it's not a great artistic job, but it gives you the actual opportunity to add specific shapes hand-drawn by you to this planet. So you can do pretty much anything. You could draw a face if you wanted to. Okay, so let's say you have like a chunk of land. Let me paint a larger one. And you want to actually adjust the height of like this particular spot maybe. So if you want to change the height, you click on this drop down arrow and choose the height option. And now if you paint on your terrain, you should see the changes reflected. And if I decrease the brush intensity, you should see that it slowly changes from this grasslands to tundra, and from tundra, if you continue painting it, it'll eventually, let me increase the intensity, it'll eventually change to a snowy biome sort of thing. So that's how you pretty much adjust your height. If you do this in the desert, you should see the desert fading to grassland, then to tundra, and then to snow. So if I continue painting, you'll actually see some snowy peaks appear. And that's how it works pretty much. You can also use this tool to extend certain regions of your polar caps, if that's the way you want to use it. Right, so let's say you've either painted your terrain or you've just adjusted some settings in the details panel of your planet blueprint, and for some reason you want to export it, either to use it in Unreal or any third-party software. You can just click on this baking button and you should see some options appear. First one's resolution. The max is 8K, so I'm going to change this to 8K. Now I'm gonna set a different disk location because it won't actually save this on your local system disk, so that's an important point. And you just give your planet a name, and I'm just gonna leave it at planet for now. And then just press bake. It should do this thing for a couple of seconds, and it's going to change back to whatever you had before. And if you just hit escape, now you should be able to find your files at the location you've specified them to be saved at. And don't be confused about the fact that they look pitch black. It's just because the alpha channel is empty, and so it's set to 0 by default, which means that the texture is full transparent. But when you actually import them to any software, you should be able to just ignore the alpha channel, and in Unreal you can just do it by opening up your texture and disabling alpha. Now you can see that it has saved the information I painted on the planet previously, and it has done so for the albedo. And you also have the city mask, which shows you the city lights on the planet. Right now it's not showing anything because I had the ocean level set to 1, and accordingly it didn't add any cities because there aren't any in the ocean. Also has the normal. You don't see much detail here because it's so subtle that you don't see the detail reflected on the normal map, but rather when you actually apply it to a material. And finally you have the specular map, which is white for ocean and black for land, and you can do pretty much whatever you want with these maps you have extracted from your planet. So that was just a quick example. I'm gonna delete them, and that's pretty much it. There's obviously way more to cover, and there are lots of different parameters you can change to make your planet look drastically different from the default one, and some of them are shown here, like these desert planets, ocean planet, and so on. You also have this exaggerated kind of example of how you can artistically tweak a planet to look more, well, stylized as far as the colors go. And down here you have the randomly generated planets. Down here at this tutorial section here, there's also an example of the actual baked maps of the default planet. So right here you can see the albedo, the exaggerated normals, so they're better visible, the water mask, and the city lights. And that's pretty much it. So that was a quick overview for the product CreoTerra that I've actually made a relatively long time ago. We just didn't put it up on the marketplace. So if you are considering to buy this product, this video should sort of help you make your decision. And thanks for watching. Bye.